NFL free agency has started with an absolute bang, and so in today's video, I wanted to talk about the biggest 25 free agent signings and grading them from a scale of F to A as to what I like for the teams. Now remember, this is based on the teams, so a player getting the bag is good for them, but maybe not so much for the grade. But before we get into the video, I want to take a quick second to ask you to please subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for notifications. It really helps us out. If you're a fan of the NFL, you'll love this channel as we release videos every Tuesday and Friday all year round. Now, let's get back to the video. Now, I should note that I'm filming this video on March 13th, so I might not have the most up-to-date signings, but we're going to have all the top 25 signings as at the time of this recording. And we're going to start with our biggest signing, Chris Jones. This was always the biggest free agent on the market, and he decided to stay in Kansas City for a 5-year, $158.75 million deal. This is an absolutely absurd deal for anyone that's not a quarterback, especially an interior defensive lineman who typically don't get paid anywhere close to this much. That being said, I still graded this as an A-. I think this is a fantastic deal for Kansas City because you are in win now mode. And any deal, no matter the cost, that allows you to keep the majority of your core together that has won 2 straight Super Bowls, yeah, it's worth it. It's an A-. You might have to eat a bit on the back end, but who cares if you win another Super Bowl or 2. At number 2, we got Kirk Cousins going to the Atlanta Falcons for 4 years, $180 million with $90 million of that guaranteed. This is way bigger than the 2-year $70 million that was projected for Cousins, and he got the absolute bag. Now, I love this contract for the Falcons and for Kirk Cousins. The Falcons having a true quarterback to go with Drake London, Bijan Robinson, and Kyle Pitts is absolutely what this team needed. But I do not love this contract. A quarterback who's in his late 30s, going to be paid $40 million a year, $45 million a year. That's absolutely insane money for a guy who's won 1 playoff game. Again, the fit is so good, but the contract is risky, so I'm going to give it a B. It's pretty average. The fit carries it here, but this could be a contract they regret on the back end, especially if Cousins starts to decline whatsoever. At number 3, we have Brian Burns. Now, technically, this was a trade by the Giants, and he signed with the Carolina Panthers, the 5-year, $150 million deal with nearly $90 million guaranteed after signing a franchise tag. But effectively, this contract was with the Giants. It's just legally signed with the Panthers. Either way, this is an incredibly expensive contract. Yes, it's similar to in line with the Chris Jones deal. And yes, Brian Burns is at a more premium position, defensive end, and younger at only 26 years old compared to 30 years old. But at the end of the day, Brian Burns has not been that effective with the Carolina Panthers to earn this kind of money. This is a contract that I don't love for the Giants, especially a Giants team that doesn't feel like they're going to be competing, at least for the majority of this Burns contract. So I'm going to give it a C+. Again, getting a really talented player like Brian Burns for only the cost of a 2nd and a 5th round pick for the Giants, yeah, that's a great move. But this is a hell of an overpay, and you're not going to be competing during Burns' productivity window, and so it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So it gets a C+. At number 4, we have Justin Madubuike signing a 4-year, $98 million contract with $53.5 million guaranteed. Given his age and his productivity level for a Ravens defense that absolutely relied on this guy last year, this is a slam dunk of a signing to keep for the Ravens. This is an A. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. The value is good. The fit is great, and this is just one of the better signings. I think the Ravens are very happy to keep him in-house. They did have to utilize the franchise tag to make sure he didn't get to hit the open market, but I don't think that Madubuike is going to be that upset given he's getting paid, and I think the Ravens are pretty happy with it. At number 5, we got Christian Wilkins, and this was the biggest surprise non-tag at the tag deadline. He signs a 4-year, $110 million contract with nearly $60 million guaranteed to go to the Las Vegas Raiders. You can already see the name of the game in the early free agents is interior defensive linemen, with Wilkins, Madubuike, and Chris Jones all fitting this bill. And this contract is pretty pricey. It's more expensive than the Madubuike contract, and I think most people would have Madubuike as a better player than Christian Wilkins. That being said, I still give this a B+. I still think it's a very good signing, especially for a Raiders team that has cap space and Antonio Pierce, who's kind of trying to keep his job. This is a team that really needs talent. That's what they've been missing. And Christian Wilkins is not only a very talented player who will help their defensive line, but he fits seamlessly into this defense because Max Crosby is going to eat now that he has a good interior defensive lineman to play next to. In the past, Max Crosby is kind of being a guy that all the teams could just say, okay, just stop him and we stop the Raiders' pass rush. That's no longer the case with Wilkins. So I expect Wilkins to benefit from Crosby, and I expect Crosby to benefit from Wilkins. So I think it'll be a great symbiotic relationship that will really help the Raiders' defense improve to being one of the better defenses in the league in 2024. Might be a bold take, but I think it could be. At number 6, we have Jaylen Johnson signing with the Chicago Bears, 4 years, $76 million contract with $43.8 million guaranteed. I love this deal for the Bears. This was a guy who absolutely showed out in 2023, and him, along with Montez Sweat, who they got at the trade deadline, really turned this defense into one of the better units in the league, something I never thought would happen coming into the 2023 season. The Bears managed to lock up this 25-year-old for less than $20 million a year for 4 years. Yes, they used the franchise tag to facilitate that, but I don't think anyone here is complaining, and this is my one and only A+. Yes, Jaylen Johnson could absolutely regress. It could be an aberration this past year, but I don't think that's the case. I think this defense is only going to get better. Jaylen Johnson is only going to improve, and this is going to be a slam dunk of a signing. If Johnson is anywhere close to his 2023 production, it's an A+. At number 7, we have Michael Pittman Jr. signing a 3-year, $70 million contract, $46 million of which is guaranteed, staying with the Indianapolis Colts. Another guy who the franchise tag was used to keep him in-house, but signed very quickly. I don't actually remember this ever happening in the past. This many guys signing the tag and then within 2 weeks signing longer-term deals. It usually feels like it takes a bit longer. Not sure what it was, but hey, I don't think anyone's complaining. Getting these guys locked up is good for the teams, and the players are happy to get more guaranteed money on the table. As for what I think of this contract, it's a B to me. It's a fairly average mid contract. Like, it's good. You're keeping a very good player, a wide receiver 1 in-house. They needed to do this, but he's not anything crazy for this value. It's just a good signing. At number 8, we have Mike Evans on a 2-year, $41 million contract. Now, you might notice this is a bit different than what was reported being a $52 million contract, but that's because $11 million of that is in incentives that are right now not expected. Yes, if he hits those incentives, he's going to get paid more, but if he hits those incentives, then the Buccaneers are not going to be mad paying him that additional money. The real issue is, would they be paying him way too much money for him to kind of start to fall off in his 30s, which a lot of receivers do? Having the contract structured this way really helps to protect the Buccaneers, and so I give it a B-. It's still not a great contract. You're still paying a 30-plus-year-old wide receiver over $20 million a year, but you're not paying him over $25 million a year, and that's why this still reaches the B tier, just the low B tier. At number 9, we have Saquon Barkley signing a 3-year, $37.8 million contract with $26 million of that guaranteed with the Philadelphia Eagles, a rival of the Giants. There were a few rivalry signings in this free agent period. We'll get into a few more of those later on in the video. As for what I think of this signing, I think it's a really good match for Barkley and the Eagles. Barkley has always been kind of the go-to option in an offense for the Giants, who really had no receiving options and didn't have a great quarterback in Daniel Jones. Now he's going to the Eagles, who have a better offensive line, who can't stack the box because Jalen Hurts could run with it or pass it to Dallas Goedert, A.J. Brown, or Devontae Smith. And so now Saquon Barkley can kind of just be explosive without teams being able to solely focus on him. So to me, this is an A-. Now, it's tougher to put it higher than an A- because I know a lot of people don't love paying running backs. But look at Derrick Henry and look at Christian McCaffrey. I don't think anyone's complaining about the past contracts those guys signed. And Saquon Barkley could absolutely be like that with the Philadelphia Eagles. I love this contract, though I will say the Eagles have spent a lot of money and they have pushed a lot of it down the road. This is a team that in a few years might be in cap hell. But for now, they're fine. At number 10, we have Josh Jacobs signing a 4-year, $48 million contract with the Green Bay Packers, but only $12.5 million of that is guaranteed. This was one of the weirdest, wackiest stories of free agency. So the Green Bay Packers had Aaron Jones. and they were looking to restructure his deal. That wasn't totally going to plan, so then they go and sign Josh Jacobs. And everyone thought, wow, they're going to go with Josh Jacobs and Aaron Jones in the backfield. Then a couple hours later, Aaron Jones gets cut, and we'll talk about where he signed later on in this video as this story gets even crazier. But signing Josh Jacobs, I think, is actually a great deal for the Green Bay Packers. This is an A for me. And again, it's tough to call this an A. Paying a running back 4 years, $12 million per year might seem crazy, but you have to look at the guaranteed number. Only $12.5 million is guaranteed. This is effectively like signing Josh Jacobs to 4 straight franchise tags. You have the ability at the end of any season to just say, you weren't productive enough. We don't want to pay you another 10, 12 million, whatever it might be in a given year. And so we're just going to let you walk to free agency again. They really are on year-by-year choices to keep Josh Jacobs around, which is great for the Green Bay Packers, though not totally sure why Jacobs signed this deal. But hey, again, that's why the Packers got an A. At number 11, we have Derrick Henry to the Tennessee Titans on a 2-year, $16 million contract, $9 million of which is guaranteed. This is a really good value contract for Derrick Henry, who has had 3 of his past 4 years being 1,000-yard seasons. The only season that wasn't was only 8 games long, and he still had over 900 yards in those 8 games. He was on pace for another 2,000-yard season in that year had he not gotten injured midway through. And signing with the Baltimore Ravens, I think a lot of people see this as the perfect fit. As a power back, is the perfect complement for Lamar Jackson. I'm not one of those people, though. I have it as a B. Again, the value is great, but Derrick Henry, to me, has always been that running back who needs volume to be productive. It's not that his yards per carry isn't good and hasn't always been good. It's that he beats you by wearing you down. He beats you not in the first quarter, but in the fourth quarter. He beats you when you're bruised, you're battered, you're tired. It's why he's always so much more effective in the second half of seasons when guys are carrying bangs, bruises, and injuries compared to the first half of the season when guys are coming into games pretty sharp and ready to go. And so in Baltimore, Derrick Henry is going to need to play a much more reduced role. He's not going to be able to get his massive number of carries because Lamar's going to need to take some carries, and they're probably going to split the backfield with a guy like Elijah Mitchell. So while I think this is good value for Derrick Henry, he is a 30-year-old running back. He's going to be in a reduced role, and I don't know how successful he's going to be in a reduced role, so it's a B. At number 12, we have Dalton Schultz signing a 3-year, $36 million deal with the Houston Texans, $23.5 million guaranteed. This was a guy I thought they were going to re-sign. They did re-sign just before the free agency window opened. It makes a ton of sense for the Texans to do this because of how good a safety net this guy was for CJ Stroud going into his sophomore season. So it's a good signing. It's not a value signing. It's not anything special. It's a B+. It's good, it fits, but it's not going to be one of those contracts that's changing the game. At 13, we have Tony Pollard signing a 3-year, $24 million contract with $10.5 million guaranteed with the Tennessee Titans. And I do not like this contract. I didn't actually give any contract an F. There was no contract that I thought was so egregiously bad it deserved an F. But this was the worst contract in my opinion. I gave it a D. I just don't understand it for the Tennessee Titans. Tony Pollard did not work last year as a featured back behind a pretty solid offensive line in Dallas that had other weapons to go with it. Bring him to Tennessee, a team that's always been power back focused, and pair him with Tajay Spears, who's already a change of pace back, similar to what Tony Pollard was, and the fit just doesn't make sense. I just don't understand it. Yeah, the contract's not bad, but who cares? You have a younger, similar player in Tajay Spears, and now you're just signing Tony Pollard to, what, be a clone? I don't know. I just don't get it. At 14, we got Austin Eckler signing a 2-year, $8.4 million contract with $4.2 million guaranteed. This contract is fan-freaking-tastic. I mean, getting a guy like Austin Eckler this cheap is insane. Yes, he did not have a good season with the Chargers. But leading into 2023, this was one of the best running backs in the NFL. And yes, his 2023 was not very good. But at the end of the day, not many players had a very good season on a Chargers team that had a really down year in 2023. This is absolutely a guy who could jump back, and if he does, Well, great. You have him signed to a second year at a very reasonable AAV. You are happy with that. Absolutely, if you're the team that signed him. The problem is the team that signed him was the Washington Commanders. And I just don't get this for the Commanders, which is why I'm giving this a B-. The Washington Commanders are a team that already has Brian Robinson. They let Antonio Gibson walk for a similar contract to the New England Patriots. And a team like the Commanders, who isn't looking to compete during Austin Eckler's time under contract, should be looking to sign undrafted free agents or other cheap guys to this roster spot at running back who can actually go on and become really effective starting running backs in the league. There's tons of examples of undrafted rookies becoming studs at the running back position. So why are you wasting a roster spot on Austin Eckler when you're a team that's not looking to compete in Eckler's window? It just doesn't make sense. The team, the contract, fantastic. The team, I don't get it. So it's a B-. At 15, we have Baker Mayfield signing a 3-year, $100 million contract with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, $40 million of which is guaranteed. And I think this is a pretty decent contract for the Buccaneers. Yes, you are paying a lot of money to a guy that a year ago was the hot potato of the NFL. But he had a really good year with the Buccaneers last year, and this contract isn't overly egregious. Only $40 million guaranteed means that there's outs after both 2024 and 2025 if the Buccaneers decide that the Baker Mayfield experiment isn't working out anymore, and it's going to have minimal negative impact on the salary cap all told. So if you're the Buccaneers, who aren't going to have a high enough pick to get a good QB in the draft anyways, why not re-sign Baker Mayfield, see if he really can be your franchise quarterback of the future, still in his late 20s, and if he's not, oh well, you move on from Baker Mayfield and you don't lose that much doing it. And so because of that, I'm giving this a B+. It's a solid, it's an above average contract. I think the Buccaneers should be happy with it. But again, it's nothing stellar. You didn't get great value on it, so B+. At 16, we have Robert Hunt to the Carolina Panthers on a 5-year, $100 million contract with $44 million guaranteed. Now, signing an offensive lineman makes so much sense for the Carolina Panthers. This is a team that spent 2 first-round picks and DJ Moore to get up to the number 1 pick to take franchise quarterback Bryce Young, who did not have a great year in year 1, but you still need to protect him to see if he could be a legit quarterback if you give him the time in the pocket. The problem is, the guy you want to sign to do that is an offensive tackle, not an offensive guard who is much more responsible for the run game as opposed to pass blocking. And so because of that and the amount of $100 million on this contract, this is a D+ to me. There is so many other players and so many other tackles that you could have spent this money on. But instead, you spend it on Robert Hunt, a very good interior offensive lineman, but still an interior offensive lineman. I just don't understand what the Carolina Panthers are trying to do here. I don't think they understand how to totally protect a quarterback. Heck, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this guy becomes one of the elite pass blockers in the league at an offensive guard position, and it doesn't matter that he's not an offensive tackle. But still, I don't like it. Maybe I'm too conventional. I think this needed to be a tackle, so this is a D+. At 17, we got Jonathan Greenard signing with the Minnesota Vikings, 4 years, $76 million contract, $42 million of which is guaranteed. Now, this contract, it's all right. Like, it's not a bad contract by any means, but this is a guy who didn't really feel like that big a contributing factor on the Houston Texans' resurgence. Will Anderson Jr. really carried that defensive line, and this guy was kind of just a complimentary pass rusher that really benefited from Will Anderson Jr. also being on that line, especially seeing as Jonathan Greenard never did anything close to what he did this past year prior to this past year. In terms of his signing with the Minnesota Vikings, I get what the Vikings are doing. They're trying to replace Danielle Hunter, who left in free agency, who was also a pass rusher, who was very effective for the Minnesota Vikings last year. That being said, I don't think Jonathan Greenard is as good as Danielle Hunter, and I think the Minnesota Vikings are trying to avoid a rebuild, but I really think they need to just commit to the rebuild, especially given their division is so talented and so young that doing a half-assed rebuild just isn't going to really work. And so, because of all that, to me, this is a C. Again, it's just a pretty mid contract. Like, it's not a bad deal. I'm not saying this is an egregious overpay by any means, but the fit is all right. I don't love the direction of the Vikings, and I just don't love the contract, so it's a C. At 18, we got Xavier McCoy signing with the Green Bay Packers. 4 years, $68 million contract with $25 million of that guaranteed. This is a decent player and a decent contract. He's a safety, so it's a little bit of an overpay compared to the open market going rates for safeties. But at the end of the day, he's still 25 years old, and this is absolutely a position of need for the Green Bay Packers, who have needed a safety for the past couple of years. And so this is a good fit. I end up putting this at a B- because I think this is a bit of an overpay, but a young guy in a position of need for a team that is trying to compete moving forward, it's not a bad deal, which is what puts it into the low B tier. At 19, we have Leonard Williams signing a 3-year, $64.5 million contract, 43.9 of which is guaranteed, with the Seattle Seahawks. Now, I will fully acknowledge this ranking might be a little biased because I think Leonard Williams is one of the more underrated interior defensive linemen in the NFL. Every time I watch this guy, he's an absolute game breaker, game wrecker, and he just hasn't been on a truly competitive team to be able to show how much of a game breaker and game wrecker he is. And while Seattle isn't necessarily a truly competitive team, they are still a team that I think wants to compete and can still compete for playoff spots. And with a good draft here and some good picks there, they could be a true competitor in the NFC. And so I give this a B+ grade. Again, this is probably a little biased because I think I overrate Leonard Williams compared to most. And if you rate him how I think most people rate him, this is more of a B-, C+, but I rate him quite highly, and as such, this is a B+. At 20, we got Gabe Davis signing a 3-year, $39 million deal with the Jacksonville Jaguars, $24 million of which is guaranteed. Gabe Davis is a guy that has shown absolute flashes of brilliance, but has not been able to be consistent. In Buffalo, he had every opportunity to succeed, but he would always have a breakout game followed by an absolute dud, followed by a breakout game, followed by another dud. It was so tough to know when Gabe Davis was going to pop off, and if you're a fantasy player, you know what I'm talking about if you've ever owned Gabe Davis. It was a brutal experience. As for the team signing him, the Jaguars, I don't totally see the fit. They already have Zay Jones, Christian Kirk, Evan Engram, along with Travis Etienne at the skill positions. Another wide receiver doesn't really feel like what the Jaguars need to become a competitive team. It feels like they need other positions, bolstering the defense, maybe the offensive line. And so because I don't totally understand the fit, I'm giving this a C. It's not a terrible contract. It's not terrible money, $13 million a year for 3 years. You can get out of it after 2 years, fine. But I just don't like the way that the Jags are spending their money. I mean, they're already putting it was a 4-year, $72 million contract into Christian Kirk. This just seems like another wide receiver overpay for someone who's going to be every bit as inconsistent as Calvin Ridley was, a guy that they let walk in free agency because of the inconsistencies, I would imagine. And at 21, we have Calvin Ridley signing a 4-year, $92 million contract with the Tennessee Titans, $50 million of which is guaranteed. Now, this is a contract I am really split on. In terms of fit, I love the fit. This is a fantastic fit signing for the Tennessee Titans. You have a young Will Levis and not really much to go on in receivers. You have an aged DeAndre Hopkins and a Treylon Burks who just is not working out as a former first-round pick. And so you bring in a proven commodity in Calvin Ridley, who can absolutely be the wide receiver one on this team, to try to help see if Will Levis is going to be the guy or if you need to go back to the drawing board on quarterbacks. However, paying a 29-year-old wide receiver with inconsistency issues who's been suspended a lot recently due to gambling problems, $92 million over 4 years with $50 million of that guaranteed, that is just way too expensive for what Calvin Ridley has shown to be recently. Let's face it, we have not seen a good version of Calvin Ridley in 2 to 3 years at this point? And so paying him this much money going into his 30s, I do not love it in terms of contract. And so at the end of the day, I give this a C+. In terms of fit, this is an A. In terms of contract, this is like a D-, maybe even an F. And so it rounds out to being a C+ territory because I'm just so torn on if I love or hate this deal. And so it just becomes, mid. At 22, we have Danielle Hunter signing with the Houston Texans, a 2-year, $49 million contract, $48 million which is guaranteed. So basically fully guaranteed contract, like $1 million non-guaranteed. He's going to get paid that. Yeah, it's going to happen. I find this contract pretty funny because we already had Greenard go from the Texans to the Vikings, and now we have Danielle Hunter going from the Vikings to the Texans, two guys that are both primary pass rushers. So just kind of a funny trade of players. In terms of how I like it, though, I like Danielle Hunter to the Texans a lot more than I like Greenard to the Vikings, and so I give it an A. Danielle Hunter had an excellent season, being really the only primary pass rusher on the Minnesota Vikings, and so now he'll go and be an awesome 1-2 punch with Will Anderson and an improving defense and team altogether with the Houston Texans, who are going to try to compete in the AFC this year. I love the contract too. I think it's a good money deal given how productive Danielle Hunter was this past year and fills a need with Jonathan Greenard leaving. Everything about it makes sense for the Texans, makes sense for Danielle Hunter. And yes, it's a lot of money and a lot of guaranteed, but it's only 2 years of guaranteed. Most of these contracts that are 4 years long have at least 2 years guaranteed. And Danielle Hunter's only going to be 31 years old at the end of this contract. That is not egregiously old for a pass rusher, and so there's no real negatives to this contract for me. It's an A. At 23, we have Aaron Jones, and we're coming back to a few things I talked about earlier in this video. He signed a 1-year, $7 million deal with the Minnesota Vikings, arch rival of the Green Bay Packers. So another rivalry signing, and this goes along with the Josh Jacobs signing earlier that we talked about. So Aaron Jones ended up getting cut by the Packers and so signed a vindictive contract with the Minnesota Vikings. And let's be clear, the only way to explain this contract is vindictive. When the Packers were trying to get Aaron Jones to restructure his deal, they were trying to get him down to about $6-7 million. And if he didn't go down to it, they were going to cut him. And that's what they did. And so what does he do? He immediately signs the same value he is unwilling to take with the Packers with one of their biggest rivals in the Vikings. This is just absolutely vindictive. I love it. And literally for the memes, I'm giving it an A-. Yes, I know at the end of the day, I don't know if this is totally worth it for an Aaron Jones who has had some injury history, had trouble staying on the field, and some inconsistency issues at that. But at the end of the day, it's a low-risk, 1-year deal, and I just love the vindictiveness of it. I love the memes of it, and so I'm putting it in A- tier. At number 24, we have another rivalry signing with Patrick Queen leaving the Baltimore Ravens to go to the Pittsburgh Steelers for a 3-year, $41 million contract, $13.8 million of which is guaranteed. I think this is a great signing for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think Patrick Queen fits that defense perfectly, and that is the consensus among most of the analysts out there. He fills in the boots that were left empty by Ryan Shazier and that absolutely dreadful injury years ago. And I think they needed this type of player to really bolster their defense to the next level. As for the terms of the contract, 3 years, $41 million seems quite reasonable for a player of Patrick Queen's skill set. Yeah, interior linebackers tend not to make this much money, so this might seem like a little bit of an overpay, but at the end of the day, this is a really good player, and his guaranteed money is pretty limited, meaning if he's not the guy that fits the defense like you expect him to, you can get out of this contract pretty easily. And because of all that, this is an A to me. I think this is just a slam dunk signing, and it's low risk with the guaranteed money. So kudos, Pittsburgh. Good deal here. And at 25, we have our final player, Russell Wilson, also signing with the Pittsburgh Steelers on a 1-year, $1.2 million contract. Now, if you're talking just in terms of the contract value, this is an A+++, infinite pluses. I mean, Russell Wilson was not a bad quarterback, even with the Denver Broncos. I know all the memes about him. But if you look at his stats, he really wasn't a terrible quarterback in Denver. The problem was he wasn't worth his near $50 million contract, and he wasn't taking the Broncos all the way to a Super Bowl, and so the contract was a failure, and they just wanted out of it earlier. But signing him on a 1-year, $1.2 million contract, that's a fantastic value signing for the Pittsburgh Steelers. That being said, I'm only giving it a B. And that's because I don't love the move for the Steelers long term. This feels like the Steelers think that the upgrade from Kenny Pickett or Mitch Trubisky or Mason Rudolph or whoever the hell else they would have at quarterback to Russell Wilson is enough to take them over the hump and become a Super Bowl winning team. That's the only reason you make a deal like this for a 35-year-old quarterback instead of going in the draft or trading for a Justin Fields, who's definitely out there. The thing is, I don't think that Russell Wilson is the QB that can get the Steelers over the hump and make this team, as it's currently constructed, able to compete for a Super Bowl. I would have preferred the Steelers to go after Justin Fields. I think that made a lot more sense. I'm not the biggest Justin Fields fan. I'm the first to admit it. But at the end of the day, I'm willing to admit if I'm wrong, and there is the possibility that I am wrong on Justin Fields. And the Steelers would have been the perfect fit for Fields to see if this would work. He's a young quarterback. They could have re-signed him. They could have built around him for years. And if it didn't work, fine. You maybe lost some mid-round picks. Whatever. But now you're just going with the low-risk Russell Wilson. But I think it's also a low-reward signing. And so it's not going to bring the Steelers over the hump. We've all seen the memes, the illusion of choice. Keep Kenny Pickett, sign Russell Wilson, and they both take you to a first-round exit. So that's my initial impressions of the top 25 free agent signings of this offseason. As you can see from all those players and all that money, this has been a wild free agency period. Seems unprecedented in my memory for free agency in the NFL. But let me know what you think. What do you think were the best and worst contracts signed in this free agency period? Let me know in the comments. We'll see you all next time. Peace!